So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're going to follow up on our ride review of the Vmoto Stash with a static review. And for no particular reason at all, but I thought I'd put it next to the sort of generations of Super Socko motorcycles. So we have the first generation, which is the TS, the TC, the TSX and the TC Max. Second generation is Wanderer, Hunter and Wanderer and Hunter Pro. And now we have the sort of latest incarnation from Vmoto, the Stash. So I'm not going to do too much on the others because they've been well talked about before, but I thought it just would be interesting for you to see the lineup. And we'll go around the bike, show you something about it, and hopefully that will help you make an informed decision. So let's get to it. So I'm not going to go too much over the history, but the TS was the very first electric motorcycle I ever rode back in 2017, and the TC was the very first one we ever sold in 2018. So very sort of established bike now, still available in a dual battery guise, 28 mile an hour only, 60 volt, 30 amp hour, 3 kilowatt max, does what it says on the tin, all very well and good. The Wanderer and Hunters came out, originally they came out in a 45 mile an hour bike. They have now been dropped in the UK and replaced by this one, which is the Hunter and Wanderer Pro. And they are 45 mile an hour bikes, 5.5 kilowatt max and two 60 volt 32 amp hour removable batteries. The TC Max is an evolution of this because it was based upon the same front end at least, but that is 60 mile an hour, one big 72 volt 45 amp hour battery, and not hub driven, so belt driven. So currently in the sort of 60 mile an hour options, you have the Wanderer and Hunter Pro at sort of high 50s and the TC Max. You might choose the TC Max over these ones because of the ultimate top speed, although the power on this one is greater. Most people will choose these new bikes, the Hunter and Wanderer Pros, because of how they look. Bigger, as you can see as I look down the bikes, there's more to them than the standard TC and hence TC Max. So just to prove the point that a TC Max is an evolution of a TC, these panels do actually go onto a TC directly, as does the seat. So that's why we say it's the first generation bike. Okay, but moving on. So now we have the Stash. The first thing to say about the Stash is it's Vmoto, not Super Socko. So here you go. The emblem has now changed to Vmoto. This was the emblem before. And what's actually happened is Vmoto and Super Socko have sort of now become one entity, which is now Vmoto. So going forward, it will be Vmoto products, not Super Socko products, at least as far as I understand it. Okay. As I said, it is the flagship bike now. It's superseded the TC Max, and there is a lot more to it. So if you think about it, a TC Max has 5 kilowatts max. This one has 5.5 kilowatts max. This one has 14.4 kilowatt max. So that is getting onto 20 horsepower. Okay, so it's a step up, you know, nearly 3 times the power of a TC Max. It's 75 mile an hour and not 60 or 55 depending. And it's a lot more of a bike. The design is a lot more aggressive. It was actually designed in Europe and not in China, which might say something about the design itself. But we'll start off at the front and then see where we get to. So the first thing to sort of say about the front end is, other than the design, is actually the brakes. So we pretty much come to this always, but as you can see down here, this is ABS. So this has ABS and it also has, if I can find them, Pirelli tyres, Dablo Rosso. Okay, so one thing that sort of delayed the release of this bike, certainly in the UK, was that Vmoto UK wanted the Pirelli tyres and the ABS added. There are a lot more bikes now coming out with ABS on them. So Segway do ABS bikes, Nubot, Zeeho, a lot of bikes now coming out with ABS as a standard feature in this sort of class. It's not, you know, just the zeros and above that will have ABS. So all good, I say. So ABS, front and back Pirelli tyres. Still 17-inch wheels, just like the others, but tyres can actually make quite a big difference to the actual riding experience, so nothing to complain about there. As you see about the body, it's a lot more aggressive, I guess, in its styling, and we can come to the sort of naming convention, why they chose Stash right now. So the idea behind calling it a stash was because you can stash stuff under the lid. Okay, and we talked about this in the ride review. So just before we get on to what you can actually put under it, this is the charger. So what's interesting about this charger is actually, as you can see down here, 20 amp charging. So before that, the CPX was the highest rated charger available in all the bikes that we did with 15 amp. So they've actually increased the charging capacity of the charger to 20 amp. So if you think about it, the reason for that is obvious, faster charging time, but because there's more battery. Okay, so if you actually do the maths on these bikes, so the TC at the end there had a 1.8 kilowatt hour battery. Okay, you could double it up to 3.6. The Wanderers and the Hunters and the Pros of those versions had a 60 by 32. So not a lot of difference, to be honest. About 1.9 kilowatt hours, let's say, so 3.8 kilowatt hours. This one has a 74 volt, about 100 amp hour or 97, something like that, amp hour battery. So it's 7.1 kilowatt hours. So again, a massive increase in over the other bikes. And for not a lot of more money, really, in reality. Just as a comparison, and we're not really trying to compare this to a Zero, but that is the next category up. This bike has come out to sort of fill a gap between the TC Max, the CR6, the Vogue ER10, fill the gap between those bikes and the next category up, which is Zeros, and then above that is Energica and all that sort of thing. Okay, so if you think about an entry-level Zero, they are starting, let's say, about £12,000, but they have 7.2 kilowatt hour batteries. And this one is a 7.1 kilowatt hour battery, and the battery capacity often is a big contributor to the cost. So you're talking about literally pretty much the same battery capacity as an entry-level Zero, but we're talking about £6,500 rather than 12, whatever. Obviously, power, speed, outright performance can't compare. But batteries, which do drive a lot of the cost of these bikes, you're getting on almost parity between an entry-level Zero. So a 7.2 Zero, 7.1 stash, okay? So a 20 amp hour charger will charge this bike in about 5.5 hours. One thing to note is that there is no Type 2 charging on this bike. So you charge the battery through here, okay? And actually, if you take this out underneath here, that's the top of the battery there. Okay, so that's what you're sort of dealing with. And as I've said before, you don't often or rarely get a big batteries that are removable. They're just too heavy. Okay, so I can't imagine how heavy this battery would be, but if a 5.6 kilowatt hour battery is about 40 kilos, then you must be talking 80 kilos. No, sorry, 60 kilos. This bike in total weighs 152 kilos. Okay, and again, if you compared that to the sort of first generation bikes, these ones are under 100. Okay, so a lot more to it, and that is basically the battery. Okay, so as we're right here at the front, let's deal with this first. So here we've got a open-faced large helmet, and as you can see, it goes in comfortably and all good. Okay, a bit of space left even for maybe a disc lock or something like that. But here we have a full-faced large helmet, and doesn't seem to want to go. And unfortunately, we have tried this numerous times, and it's not possible. Okay, so the point of the bike's name is obviously that you can stash stuff away, but unfortunately, I think that anything over a medium or possibly even a small, depending on how the helmet looks and the shape of it, that might not go under there. So yes, you can stash stuff away, but it really depends on the size of the helmet as to whether it includes that. Luckily, they've got lugs here. There is a rack coming, and hopefully that will be available soon. And then you could still take large full-face helmets, but do be aware that you need to check that if that's one of your considerations. Okay, so that's that. Let's go a bit more around the bike. So, as we said before, the more powerful bikes are going to have chain driven rather than hub motors. So this one, 5.5 kilowatt hub motor on this Pro and 3 kilowatt on this TC. Most of the reason for that is actually, again, down to the battery. They need to, the battery and the power. They need to make enough space for the battery to go. So they want small motors, which is fine. And to get a lot of power into a hub motor, you have to then start thinking about the weight that you're adding to the rear wheel. So, for example, a Macrass ZAX, its rear hub motor, which is 20 kilowatts, so pretty powerful, weighs about 22 kilos. So that would mean that you'd have a 22 kilo bit of weight spinning around on your back wheel. So eventually, it just doesn't make sort of physical sense, as in physics, to put the motor in the rear wheel. I mean, it's possible. We've got a Newbot Storm over there, and that has one still, and that goes 93 miles an hour. But usually, you're going to move away from hub motors to belts or chains. In this case, it's chain driven, okay, and it's sitting about there, okay, and everything basically above that is the battery, non-removable, obviously, and but it will give you nearly 20 horsepower, okay, which again, in petrol terms or in zero terms is not a lot, but it is to give you enough to do about 70 miles an hour, which is essentially what you need for fast commuting, into city commuting down a motorway and things like that. Okay, so if we now look at the dash, so the dash has been upgraded quite significantly. So that's the TC Wanderer, and the TC is the same dash. It's also the TC Max dash. As you can see here, nice color display. It's got a light sensor in it, so the closer we get, we're going to trip that. And here you can see this is green will be when it's regen, and red will be when it's actually consuming power. This shows flashes red when you hit the boost. Okay, so the boost is about 3 miles an hour more. Okay, and this is often the case in bikes that have boost modes. You don't get a lot more, but it's to help you maybe with overtaking and things like that. Okay, so for example, the Silence SL1 Plus, it has a boost mode. It actually adds 6 miles an hour more, but it lasts for 30 seconds. Okay, so that's what the compromise is. Obviously, if you were riding around on boost all the time, then you'll just go through the battery just like that. So that is an indicator of power out and boost. So you've got a state of charge here, 87%, revs, time, parking mode. This is your tyre monitors, so it can monitor the pressure of your tyres, and this is showing ABS is activated, trip counter and things like that. Okay, this little indicator down here of 14.3 volts, that is the other battery. So you'll often find on these sort of more modern bikes that there is another battery involved, and that is to do things like, on other bikes, for example, it does things like allow you to open the lid through a key fob, or it might power GPS or the alarm or something like that. But it is another battery. It's a little lead acid battery, and it's under the seat in this case, and it's telling you there that it's got 14.3 volts in it. It can, maybe not on this bike yet because we haven't had it long enough to see, but it can be the case that the little battery goes flat because it's a very small capacity battery. So if things start not working, so we've had an example where we've got a Zeeho bike, wouldn't start. That was because the little battery was flat. So we had to take out the little battery, charge it, little 12 volt lead acid battery, charge it up, put it back in the bike, and it starts the bike now. Okay, so there is a consideration to be made about keeping an eye on that. It gets charged through the other rest of the bike. Okay, so going around the dash, you've got your kill switch, hazards, 3 modes, and reverse, master cylinder. On this side, you've got horn, indicators, still silent, as I always like to point out. You've got your boost mode, cruise control, and then you've got your set button. So the set button gets you through into this menu. So there's 2 choices of dash. That's the first thing that happens when you press the set button. And then you've got this ability to link an app to the bike. So this is now not the Vmoto app. It's a third-party app. And we need to sort of do another review on just that app, because according to that app, unlike what I said on the ride review, you can do navigation replay from your phone onto the screen. Okay, so I did say on the ride review that there wasn't any navigation, but this app does seem to be able to do that, but we need to look more into that and we'll come back to you. Then you've got the options from the dashboard itself. Okay, so you've got obviously the version information, and you scroll through the menus through here, okay, up and down, etc., etc. And if you want to change any, you press and hold the set button, and then you can actually go down and change things. So you can change from the display to, as in night mode, which is what it's doing automatically or not. You can pick the language that it's in, metric or English miles an hour, kilometers, is your phone Android or iOS, temperature settings, and then pressure learning, which is how you get it to understand what the tire pressure is. Okay, so that's all done through these few buttons here. Okay, so that's that. So, other things to talk about. We mentioned this on the ride review, but one of the things, I always try to find something that I need to niggle about. That is where your steering lock is, so not particularly easy to get to. Okay, you have to go through there. The weight limit is something else also that you might want to be aware of. So, as I said, 152 kilos weight limit of weight of the bike, but its weight limit is 150 kilos. Okay, so if you're someone like me, weighs about 80, you're leaving about 60, 70 for a passenger. Perfectly possible. I'm just saying that maybe something to consider. They're all actually about that, so I wouldn't particularly put it as an issue to do with this particular bike, but it is just something to say. And really, what they actually say in the manual is 75 each. Okay, so technically speaking, I'm too heavy. Anyway, as for colours, we've got the blue, which is that sort of rather nice blue over there, and the black, and that is the choices really. And essentially, that's it. So you've got 5.5 hour charging time, nearly 20 horsepower, 72 with the boost. Range is going to be, well, quoted range is about 120, but you know, realistic range, if you're on a motorway, I estimate more like 60, because normally when they quote ranges, they're talking about slowest speed, lightest rider, warm day, etc., etc. So not particularly realistic. So let's just be on the safe side and say 60, which is what we would always do anyway. We'd knock off a good few miles for the realities of it. 20 amp charging, belt driven, Pirelli tyres, ABS, menu system that looks like you've got navigation played through your phone, and then lastly onto price, I guess. So this bike is still on the grant. So the RRP of the bike, if you're not in the sale, so the sale is just about over in Vmoto UK. So the launch price was 6,299, which meant the RRP was 6,799, and we got the £500 back for you through the grant. So 6,299 in the sale. After the sale, it's 6,599 to you. So in other words, 7,099 is the RRP. And personally, I think that's actually good value if you put it in context with where it is and what's next. So what's next is zero, essentially. There isn't really anything between this. There's obviously the Naxeon, which is a similar speed and performance sort of bike. There are things like the new bots and all those sorts of things. But in terms of where it sits and what it's aimed at, which is fast commuting, dual carriageway, motorway, etc., 6,500, I think is actually good value. And of course, it then also means that you get a 3-year grant on warranty on the battery and a 2-year warranty on the bike itself. Okay, so I hope that you found that useful. I hope you sort of like the comparison to the generations. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. You're obviously more than welcome to come and have a test ride of the bike. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Green-Mopeds, for other reviews as they come out. And thanks very much.